conversation? Can we have a conversation? Okay, so I'm gonna ask a couple of questions. The first of which is, what's the most important thing you need to do to take care of yourself? Yoga. Pray. Meditation. Massage. Sleep. Okay? So I'll ask a follow-up question. What happens when we fail to engage in those practices? We burn out. We get stressed. Mental breakdown. Irritability. So I hear a combination of things. Unequivocally, for me, the answer to that question, though, is all of what you've said. It's self-care. For me, self-care is so important because self-care saved my life. That's probably what you would consider a pretty powerful statement, but in 2016, my body literally started to shut down. I couldn't digest food. I got shingles. I began to experience suicidal thoughts. So I sat alone in a room, tears falling down my face, fighting the thoughts that I didn't want to live. And it was not until I experienced a true moment of self-care that I found myself moving in a direction where I could thrive. And in that moment of self-care, what I realized is that it's okay to cry. So for the next few moments, we will further define self-care, and I'll introduce to you the model of CRI. Because you see, crying is not just the physical act, but it's also being compassionate, reflective, and intentional about taking care of ourselves. And you see the image here. What comes up for you when you see this?
Panic. Plane needs air.
Plane needs air. Panic. What else? Secure yourself first. When we're on planes, the flight attendants tell us, secure your own mask before you seek to support others. And I have a confession. Before 2016, I was horrible at that. The challenge with that, though, is my profession is a clinical psychologist. So I work every day helping other people take care of themselves. And unfortunately, I didn't know how to do it for me, which led to an experience of burnout. Burnout is all too common, not just for clinical psychologists like myself, but if you're in a profession where burnout is common, tell me what you do.
Vacation.
Okay, that's what we do in response, but nursing is another profession that's really challenging. Teaching. Pastor, lawyer. All of these experiences are ones that come with tremendous stress and ones that come with us focusing on others rather than ourselves. And when that happens, we're unable to cry. And so I told you that 2016, when my body started shutting down, self-care saved my life. What I found was that I needed to engage in self-care. So self-care, as it's traditionally defined, is the act of nurturing one's physical, spiritual, and emotional self. And although most of us know that that's what self-care is, we don't do it. We know we should go running. We know we should, talk to our pastor. We know we should do many things. But there's a barrier. And so what CRI helped me to see is that, one, we need to be compassionate. Compassion allows us to move beyond this idea that it's not okay to not be okay. We have to be aware that in a moment of crisis, it's okay to take care of our needs. The second part of CRI is that we want to be reflective. Being reflective helps us to be more intentional about how we engage in self-care, because my definition is self-care is intentional act of nurturing one's physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, cognitive, occupational, financial, and environmental self. That's actually what we call the wellness wheel. When we engage in self-care that is, instead of passive and more active, we engage with this wellness wheel. So I'll give you an example. Back to my 2016 experience. My body was shutting down, and I couldn't eat. I told you that this wellness wheel is helpful in terms of us being reflective about what we need. So I went to the wellness wheel, and I realized that my physical well-being was not in the place that it needed to be. So instead of going to the movies, as we might do sometimes for self-care, or instead of getting my hair done or my nails done, I realized that I needed to become physical and get active. So I trained for my first triathlon. Triathlon was a big feat, but it was an intentional way of me recognizing that with purpose, I could heal my body. And so I went to the next step, or the last step of CRI, which is integrative intention. So intentionally, I registered for my triathlon, and in doing so, my body started to recover. Again, it first required for me to be compassionate, though. I had to realize that it was okay that despite my role as a clinical psychologist, I could be vulnerable and say that I wasn't okay. And then I had to reflect and say, well, what do I need? I didn't need to get my nails done. I didn't need to get my hair done, as is done with passive self-care. I needed to be more active. And so I engaged in a physical feat. And I'd like to show just what the model of CRI can look like for you. So you remember that first question I asked you? What was my first question? Can we have a conversation? Second question then. What was my second question? What was my second question? Yeah, what does self-care look like, or what is the most important thing you need to do to take care of yourself? So somebody give me their example, and we're going to go through this model together for you so you can make it applicable to your life. So who shared earlier something they needed to do? I heard massage, yoga. Okay, so let's talk about yoga when we don't do yoga. Why is it that you're not engaged in yoga even if you think that you need to be? You're too busy. What else? What are some reasons why we give ourselves the excuse that we can't? Lazy. It's too hard. I'll do it later. It makes you what? It makes you uncomfortable at times. Well, yes, self-care does require that we get out of our comfort zone. But here with compassion, if we have an awareness that what we can do for ourselves can actually be done in the moment, then maybe we won't be lazy, we won't feel so much out of our comfort zone. So let's take yoga, for example. What are some principles of yoga that we could actually do together right now? Breathing, absolutely. And so I want to ask that each of you join me in engaging in a compassionate, reflective, and intentional form of self-care of yoga now. So I'm going to ask that each of you close your eyes. And I'm going to ask that you take a deep breath in and slowly exhale out. Once more, take a deep breath in and slowly exhale out. Allow your breath to resume a normal pace. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So how long did that take? 10 seconds. And why do you think that if it hadn't been me giving you the encouragement to do so, that we wouldn't have done it for ourselves? I argue that we've got to be more compassionate with ourselves. And so that's what I'm encouraging you to do the next time you feel like you need a yoga moment, because that's your critical self-care need. To help us further along in our ability to cry, because I told you it's okay to cry, these are 3 questions that perhaps can facilitate our ability to engage in self-care. Being really intentional to say, what is it that I need? Why is this need critical, and how can I get this need met? So with yoga, we'll go back to your example of yoga. Why is yoga important for you? Okay. It keeps us sane, so it helps with our cognitive functioning. Okay. And if you remember, I said that the wellness wheel, which is what we're looking at to engage in self-care, involves cognitive functioning, okay? And so why is keeping yourself sane a critical need? Why is that something you would want to do? It helps you interact with the world. And so how could you get that need met? We demonstrated how you could get that need met right now. The last part of CRI, though, is being intentional and planning to make sure that we not only know we can with compassion, and that we not only are looking to engage ourselves in these 3 questions that I've given, but that we plan how and when we'll do it. And so most often what I like to do, or what I did for myself, was I got an accountability partner. Accountability partners are helpful because sometimes, even if we're not compassionate enough for ourselves, we might do something with another person or for another person. And with that accountability partner, you can decide when you want to start. So I'm going to ask for you to look to your left or look to your right. And I want you to ask your neighbor, what is their critical self-care need? And what are they committing to do from the time they leave here today? Okay? So you've had the opportunity to share how you plan on being intentional. And so the last thing I'll show you as it relates to this experience is what it looks like to be on the other side of learning to cry. This was taken the day of my triathlon, and I'll let you know that prior to this, I didn't know how to swim. Because, you know, triathlon is swim, bike, run. I had no clue how to swim. And there were about 200 women in the triathlon, and I was the last woman in the pool because of my intense fear of swimming. And I'll tell you, I didn't end last, though. I got out of that pool and I ran, I biked. But I think most importantly what this image displays is that when we are compassionate to say that, you know what, I'm not okay, but I don't have to stay that way. When we reflect upon, well, what is it, the specific need that I have? Is it an emotional need? Is it a social need? Is it a cognitive need? We've just demonstrated with yoga that, well, actually we said yoga for you was cognitive, but for some people, yoga is physical. For some people, yoga is spiritual. You've got to decide for yourself, what specific need do you have, and you've got to give yourself permission to do it. Not tomorrow, but today. Thank you.